He's buried in this back half somewhere, probably right around here. And you can't see the headstone for the snow.
This graveyard in Canfield, south of Hamilton, is the last resting place of Harry Lee. The grandson of escaped slaves who came to Canada through the Underground Railroad, Lee became a key figure in Hamilton's history.
Tonight, or probably around 11 o'clock, would be 60 years, the 60th anniversary of when Harry Lee was hung.
Harry Lee, the last man to be hanged in Hamilton. In 1953, Lee went to the gallows at the old Barton Street Jail. He was convicted in the murder of 38-year-old Mary Rosenblat, a mother of 2 young children.
February 3rd, 1953, Lee was marched across the yard at the Barton Street Jail, looked up at the stars and said, "Isn't that a lovely night?" and was then hanged, saying all along that he was innocent. "They hanged an innocent man," said the minister who was with him.
Reverend Sidney Kerr, a Baptist minister, believes Lee was innocent.
And then the lever was pulled and down he went. And I felt that we had lost a very dear and wonderful friend.
This was my copy that I found originally as a very, very young girl. I was about 10 years old when I found it. Yeah, the Reverend E. Sidney Kerr from the Forward Baptist Church and Reverend J. H. Blair, Central Gospel Tabernacle in Hamilton. Their last hours with Uncle Harry. They walked with him.
I can't really tell you too much about Harry, other than, you know, he was nice looking. I remember him when I learned to drive a car. I was driving the car when we left, and he was kind of saying, "Oh, you're wearing gloves," you know. And he thought that was kind of neat, I guess. Hi, I'm June Walls, and I am a descendant of the Burkes and Williams family from Canfield. Yeah, I knew Harry. You know, I didn't know him well because he was quite a bit older than me. I guess he would have been, you know, a teenager when I was a little girl.
My family was shocked of what happened, I think, because they went to school with Harry Lee. They never believed that he was guilty. They didn't think he was capable of doing something like that.
I think my parents thought he was innocent. And my mother, I've heard my mother say, well, they didn't like him being with a white woman, so.
What, Harry?
Yeah.
I can remember seeing him when I was a kid. When we lived, he went by our place down to his mother's, and I remember he had I don't know, I'd say it was a Pontiac or Chev something.
38 Chev.
Oh, something like that. And it was, and he always carried a rifle or something in the back window. And I think kids, you know, somebody carrying a gun. But he was quiet. He didn't, like if you waved or something, well, he'd wave back. But he just came to see his parents and then went back into Hamilton.
He seemed kind of nice. He you know, he wasn't overbearing or anything. He was just he's quiet, nice, quiet fella.
He wanted a snapshot of Uncle Harry, so see if this is going to be a good picture of Uncle Harry. When I was 5 years old, I was in a horrific car accident. I was taken to Hamilton General Hospital and was in a coma for about 2 months. And when I recovered from being in the coma, it was advised, mother was told that I couldn't go back home to Canfield. And at that time it was decided that I would go and stay with Uncle Harry and Aunt Sadie, and Aunt Sadie was his housekeeper. And Aunt Sadie was as familiar. I mean, we loved Aunt Sadie. She was very precious to us as well. And I went and lived with Uncle Harry and Aunt Sadie took care of me during the week. He was my daddy. I adored him.
I wanted to go with Harry tonight for the ride, and I'm as much to blame as he is. We're both crazy in love with each other. Mary Rosenblat. I'm Monda Halpern, and I am a professor at the University of Western Ontario, where I teach Canadian social history. My mother actually gave me a newspaper article that was in the Hamilton Spectator. It was the anniversary of the death of Harry Lee. We noticed that the name of the woman that he was accused of murdering was Mary Rosenblat. So we immediately thought that Mary Rosenblat was Jewish. I teach Jewish history and I'm Jewish, so I was interested in the thought that Mary Rosenblat was Jewish. As it turns out, she isn't and wasn't, but that's how I initially got interested in the topic of Harry Lee. Mary Rosenblat was married to Charles Rosenblat, and they had a daughter and a son. And she worked as a waitress at various Jewish events around Hamilton. Other than her affair with Harry Lee, led a pretty normal life. I would say she was probably lower middle class, and they lived in an area called Westdale in Hamilton. Because of the baby boom, there would have been, by the 1950s, there would have been a lot of bar mitzvahs. So 13-year-old boys coming of age, having services in the synagogue, marking their manhood. And then associated with those religious services were a lot of parties. And that's where Mary Rosenblat would have been a waitress. And that's actually, she was at the Reform Synagogue at a luncheon for bar mitzvah on the day that she disappeared with Harry Lee.
I believe that Harry probably was a little scamp when he was a kid. I remember my uncle, he said to me, it was his grandfather and my great-grandfather were together on the front step of the hotel in Canfield. And Harry was doing something crazy. And my great-grandfather said, something bad's gonna come of that boy. And he was like 10 years old. And my uncle remembered that. And I'm not sure why he told me that story, except that he knew how strongly I was in favor of black people, and we had our differences.
As the 0 hour neared, he walked up and down his cell saying, Jesus is going with me all the way. When the doctor arrived to give him a sedative, he declined with thanks and told the physician that Jesus was with him and would be with him until the end. He said he preferred to go the last mile with the Lord and be perfectly normal. The doctor spoke to him in the kindest tones and said, Harry, if that is the way you feel, it is all right. The doctor later complimented us on having him ready to die. He said, you gave him a better medicine than I had. We assured him it was the Lord and that Harry was a Christian.
There was a lot made of the fact that he was a very faithful Christian. But then you have to wonder if he was so faithful to Christianity, how could he have entered into this adulterous relationship?
My mother's perception of him, so that's all I knew, was that Harry was madly in love, and love makes you stupid sometimes. And it was very bad judgment on his place as far as my mother was concerned, that he wasn't being discreet and, but he didn't think he had to be, because he was in love.
Allison Gowling grew up in Canfield. His family knew Lee and were deeply troubled by the hanging. In 1950s Ontario, Lee's real problem might have been that he was a black man dating a white woman. When she was murdered, Lee was charged, but local talk was of a different story.
2 or 3 or whatever men, thugs if you want to call them, attempted to convince her to not see Harry anymore, and they wound up killing her. And these thugs then implicated Harry in it, and Harry was hung.
Lawyer John Agro defended Harry Lee. Back then, he was working on his first big murder case.
I was asked to be a witness to the hanging to make certain that things have been done right and as humanely as possible. But I just didn't have the courage to go, and he hanged. And to this day, I oftentimes wonder whether or not he was in fact guilty. I worry myself that there is something that I should have done, that I could have done and didn't do, that there's something that I could have said and didn't say. And, you know, when a mistake is made and a person hangs, there's no changing it.
Canfield, Ontario, December 12th, 1952. To the Most Honorable Mr. Stuart Garson, on behalf of my son, Harry Lee, I am writing to ask you if he can see his landlady, Mrs. Sarah Dennis. And could the Reverend S. Kerr come to see him, say, 1 a week? He has one, Reverend Blair, who has done much for him, and so has Reverend Kerr. But Reverend Blair lives in the city, but is a very fussy man, and Harry thought if Reverend Kerr could come in now and again, but not interfere with Reverend Blair's visits. I hope I am not doing wrong by writing you, and I hope all will be well. Sincerely yours in service, Mrs. I. Lee.
December 15th, 1952, Minister of Justice, Parliament Building, Ottawa, Ontario. Dear Sir, no doubt you will be surprised to hear from me, but I am writing, pleading on behalf of one Harry Lee, who is now in Barton Street Jail, waiting to hear how his appeal will turn out. But this is what I am asking, your permission to go down to see him just once. I have been his landlady for 15 years, and he has collected quite a number of things at my place, and I would like to take pencil and paper down and have him tell me what he wants done with it. I am hoping and praying God will undertake and give him a new trial, as this one was not carried out fair, as his lawyers were young and inexperienced in a murder trial. Lord knows he didn't kill that woman. Will you please allow me to go and hear his last requests before the time comes? I would greatly appreciate it, and now I'll close thanking you in advance. Yours truly, Mrs. Sarah Dennis.
I'm Tom Beckett. I live here in Dundas, Ontario. Originally came from Windsor, born there. Practiced law, became a judge. Was the founder of the Conservation Authority in Hamilton. There you go. That's me. I was called to the bar in Alberta, and I returned to Ontario somewhere in the middle of 1952. I guess I took on, for some reason or other, some criminal case, and so I went down one day to the Barton Street Jail to meet this client. I ran into John Bowlby there. John was another up-and-coming young lawyer in Hamilton, became quite well known. Anyway, the two of us decided we'd like to see where the hanging of Harry Lee had happened. It had been about a week before when Harry Lee was hanged. So we sought out the governor, whose name was Peddle, I think it was Peddle. And we went in and sat in his office. He was a lovely man, very charming and very ready to talk to us. So he began to tell us in detail about Harry's last day on Earth.
Mrs. Lee, his mother came around and asked people to sign a petition to save his life. And I remember a lot of us did sign. There was a couple people that said no, they wouldn't sign, but I think a lot of us did. You just think it was your kid.
They had hoped, apparently, for clemency. Apparently, Harry Lee had a lot of local support. A lot of people were rooting for him and trying their best to get clemency for him. But the Minister of Justice, for whatever reason, decided not to make a clemency order, and so the hanging was to proceed. Peddle told us he went in and told Harry this. I think this would be maybe a day before the actual hanging. And he took it very calmly, without any histrionics. He just accepted it.
My name is Dwayne Headley. I grew up in Canfield. Well, we're in front of the Canfield General Store, which was my family's store. There were two telephone companies. We had the Dunville Consolidated Telephone Company, and we had the Bell, or the Cayuga phone they called it. And we had two phones. So the railroad tracks right down there, it was long distance to call over there. That brings me to the book that I found of my mother's. In the early years of Canfield, the families, as I mentioned, didn't have any phones. It was expensive. A lot of poor people here. We had two. That gave us the job as messengers for the village. One night after closing up the store while watching TV, my mother told me she was watching I Love Lucy. The phone rang. It was the Barton Street Jail in Hamilton calling to ask us to take a message back to the family of Isaac and Addie Lee. They lived back of us on Adair Street. Their son, Harry Lee, had just been hanged for murder. They were calling, asking the Lees to claim and pick up his body after midnight. It was a beautiful snowy evening in February of 1953. The world was beautiful outside, and we had to be the bearers of this sad message. When we got back to the Lees' home, they were having a prayer meeting. It was all very, very sad. Some of their family were going by our place in the morning when the kids were going to school with their shovels over their shoulders. They had been over to the Canfield Cemetery filling in Harry's grave.
When you read the trial testimony, you can sense that Harry Lee's blackness was very much ever present in the courtroom. Nobody came out and maligned him or criticized him or was antagonistic towards him because of his race, but it was there. You could feel it. And there was also this kind of subtext of sort of black sexual potency that was ever present in the courtroom as well. This idea that he was having this affair with this married woman and that he sort of, that he took her away from her husband. It was all there, right? So even if there wasn't sort of outright accusations of that sexuality, it was implied. You can find evidence to implicate him, and you can find evidence to exonerate him. It could go either way. So it depends on sort of what your leanings are and what you're looking for.
My mother was just devastated. Well, she was, heartbroken, I mean, she knew him really well. I mean, you don't know when people grow up, you don't know what they do. But, I mean, we didn't believe that he had done that. But there wasn't, I guess, they had a jury and they decided that he did, and that was it. And he said he wasn't guilty, and he wouldn't say that he was.
So his last words when they hung him, "You're hanging the wrong man," he said.
I don't know, I'm not sure just what happened in there, but I thought there was enough that it just seemed that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I don't know. Anyhow, Mrs. Lee was heartbroken, of course, and I can remember when he was hung, few cars came out from Hamilton and they brought his body out and took it over to the cemetery.
It was a tragedy, and there was no solution. So I don't believe anything we never talked about it very much. Of course, from time to time it came up, but it was something that, it was hurtful, I think, people to talk about it because, we knew that how painful it must have been for the Lee family and for the black community to undergo something like that. But I know that when we went back to the cemetery for various people that we were putting flowers and etc., that my mother would often refer to, "Oh, Harry Lee is buried over there in an unmarked grave." And we used to go look for it, but we could never find it. But I knew it was back over close to where my family's plot was.
He's buried right against the fence. I could almost go to his gravesite because I helped Charlie Walker put in a tombstone close to his grave, and the grave was fairly fresh at the time. And we knew where he was.
It was quite an outstanding thing, and especially young people's lives, to think that we had somebody living, but he didn't seem like a hardened criminal or anything to us. I don't know what happened. But I know it was sad for his mother.
Uncle Harry was an innocent man, but a price was paid. He's with his Lord now. He's with his mother now, he's with his father now, and I know one day I'll be with him.